I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? I know that our board clerk has revised the minutes from December 11th, but are there any additions or corrections for the other three board meetings? Hearing none, they'll be accepted as presented. Open forum. At this time, we'd like to give our audience an opportunity to ask any questions about this agenda or about any other operations within the school district. Personnel matters will not be addressed in public session. Comments may be recorded and responded to by the Board of Education or the superintendent within 24 to 48 hours. We ask that you introduce yourself to the board, state if you are a district resident, and that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Hearing no takers, we'll move on. Agenda changes. We have 2 additional items under new business. Have they been shared with the rest of the board?
No. I do have paper copies.
Okay. All right. So, items 12D and E. Presentations. 2018-19 major expense projections. Lawrence?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ready? Thank you very much. This is relatively short compared to the longer discussion that we're going to get into in a couple of weeks when we present the full budget. As we go through, it was known that this is a work in process and we keep scrubbing numbers and we're still waiting for the state to settle on state aid, and hopefully, we'll get some final numbers soon. I don't know if we'll have them before the next meeting, but we should have an idea perhaps of where that will fall. As we go through this, I just want to highlight summarize where we are in terms of the major areas of increase. Now you've seen several of these items before. We've tweaked them a little bit. Salaries and wages. I pulled out special education from this line because we're going to talk about special education in a little bit more detail tonight. So we still see contractual increases for salaries and wages and teachers' retirement. Again, the percentage of the retirement percentage plus the base went up. And employees' retirement went up mainly because the base wages went up and the rates didn't change much. And health insurance, of course, we're projecting a 7% increase. Now, I added a couple of columns this time, so we went back to 16-17 because we want to take a look at special education and what's happening. So if we look at 16-17 and then what we adopted in the budget for 17-18, it's always you're looking back historically and trying to forecast where your numbers will be, and we try and add a little bit of margin because you never know when your students are going to come in or go out. And as mentioned just a few minutes ago, if you have extra money in those lines at the end of the year, you can set that aside for capital projects or other reserves. What happened this year, however, though, we built in, I should say Kimberly built in, and team, built in $200,000 extra in special education. And Angela's prepared to explain the changes that happened this year. You can see that we budgeted $2.86 million, and we're actually expecting our final expenses this year to be over $3.5. So even though we built in extra, because of the changes with the student population and the commitments there, we've gone way past the extra money that we had set aside for special education. So in addition, we're looking forward into next year with where we expect to be with some of the students and the commitments and the BOCES costs and the programs and the tuition rates. So we're seeing a significant increase in this year as well. So it's a bit frightening at first when you look at what was budgeted for this year going to what's budgeted next year, understanding that a lot of that increase, like 2/3 of that, was actually in this current year that we're accounting for, and then accounting for those students going forward. So this is a graphic of the same, pretty much the same information, showing the increases. We have salaries, if you can read it. Salaries and wages in the gray area. So we have had to add a few monitor positions, and I'll let Angie speak to that. And we have significant increases in BOCES costs as well. So I think I'll just let you take over at this point.
And I think Lauren hit on the two main areas, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. One being the tuition costs, the other being the salary and wages. But just, I think, kind of stepping back and looking at big picture, a couple of things I want to say about that is, I think this is a sign of our times. I think that we are getting needier students, more disabled students. A lot of those students are move-in students, and I'll talk about that in detail in a couple of minutes. It's more of a transient population than I think it's been in years past. We were having a conversation earlier today that families used to choose a district and stay in a district. I think generally, even with general ed and also with special ed, we're seeing a more transient population of students. I'd love to tell you that I think these numbers are going to go down, that this was a fluke, but I can't tell you that. I really think it's a trend that you're going to see continue to go up. The high need students that we have taken in are students that I think are committed, for as much as I can predict that, are younger students and students who are committed to staying in the district and will be here for the long haul. So I don't, I guess that's further bad news, but I don't anticipate those numbers going down. So that's kind of the bigger picture of that. So Lauren hit on a couple of the areas. What I'll talk about first is the tuition. So tuition would be our out-of-district placements. We certainly have students in a variety of placements. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about that, but I think looking at big picture, I went back to 14-15. I looked at our out-of-district placements and have looked at it up to date and then projected out to next year. So in 14-15, we had 15 students that were out-of-district placements. Looking at this year, we have 27. Next year, I'd anticipate, again, this is like trying to predict the most unpredictable. I would anticipate 28 students. That being said, every out-of-district placement isn't the same. So an out-of-district placement can cost you $35,000. An out-of-district placement can cost you, upwards of $140,000. So they're not like a 1-to-1 ratio there. So we're seeing two different trends within that line. The first trend would be the number of students. Obviously, if you go back just 4 years, we had 15 students. We now have 27. That's almost doubled. The large jump that Lauren talked about is this fiscal. When we make our budget, we make our predictions, we make our service requests to BOCES, it's all about this time of year that everything's happening. Last year, we had 8 high-need students, 2 significantly high-need students move in April, May, first week of June. So it's just not predictable like that. I'm not surprised the budget's that much higher, but there was no way I could have anticipated that.
And that timeline is key because at that point, the budget has already been built. So,
of those 8 move-ins, 7 of those students, have never set foot here in our buildings. There are students, they're residents of Trumansburg, but they came from another district. We're at a BOCES placement. They transferred to a BOCES placement here. Some of them residential placements. So we've had a very large move-in last spring, but there's always a transient in and out. But I'd say that's close to 33% of those placements were move-ins last spring. The other thing that's happening at the same time is we're getting costlier kids. I hate to put a price on kids, but our kids are having higher needs, therefore costing us more money. If you look at our classification rate in Trumansburg, we're right on target. We're at 17%, that's state average. I mean, we could lower that a little bit, but that's not way out of the water for a special ed classification rate. Our kids in general tend to have a lot of emotional and behavioral needs within special ed. We have a high number of residential and day treatment placements compared to some districts. That's reflected both in our out-of-district placements and our residential placements that aren't even done by the school district, that are done by Office of Mental Health. Like, it's just part of our population. So you have both of those trends going on. A lot of move-ins and kids that are more disabled, therefore being more costly than they have been in years past. The other part of that, the salary and wages, obviously not as large of an increase. This year, we added 4 new positions for monitors. Sounds worse than it is. 2 were building and 2 were transportation, so that really could be 2 kids. They needed a monitor in the building. They also needed a monitor on the bus runs. We've also added 1.5 TA positions. Some of our students need a differentiated enough curriculum that they require a teaching assistant, above and beyond the monitor position. Those numbers have been fairly stable the last couple of years. We had 25 monitors in 16-17, 27 this year. I anticipate 26 next year. I mean, those aren't large jumps in there. We do have some trends within our monitor positions. We seem to be making a concerted effort to move away from one-to-one monitors into more classroom or shared monitors. Questions about that?
I have a question. So you said that increase from 17-18.
From 16-17 to 17-18?
From 16-17, 17-18, it was about maybe a little less than 250,000, but that really or more. It was about 250,000 difference between what was projected for 16-17 and then estimated spending for 17-18 for both these programs.
For both these programs, okay.
So it counts for like 7 or 8 of those kids that you're talking about. So for the 18-19 school year, you said there's estimated about 1 more student attending BOCES, but there's a difference of about 440,000 for BOCES programs. So that's a big difference for, you're talking like 1 additional kid.
It's also an increase in the cost of the program, and that's also dependent on the number of students in each program in terms of what the tuition's going to be.
Right,
So
but
we can get a breakdown.
I don't think tuitions change that much, because if they did, I mean, that'd be a big deal. Like, that would be a big deal for, like what's...
Can we highlight on there what number you're talking about?
So I'm
The
looking at
BOCES
that
from
number.
1-4.
You're going on tuition from 17-18 to 18-19.
Yeah, 17-18 estimate for BOCES, and then the 18-19 for BOCES. So that 1443 and 1882.
So looking at, so is that,
You know, it's,
is that actual predicted cost, or is there a cushion?
There's no cushion, very low cushion in there.
I can get back to you in details for that. We do, again, as much as I can predict, only predict 1 more student going to a BOCES placement as opposed to this year. You certainly know we do have some movement within programs at BOCES too. Some movement within residential and those things too. So let me get back to you. I don't want to sit here and try and calculate it. My numbers are pretty firm, and I do have it all broken up by placement. So let me follow up with the board.
okay.
Angie, at some point in time, could we get an estimate of what the general residential cost is?
Sure. And if Kimberly believes that's appropriate, I can share it with you.
Just a ballpark?
Like what a residential placement would cost?
How many we have and what they're costing?
Let's reserve that until the next meeting, because
Okay.
we are such a small district, and I'm well, I guess we could give the fee, but we are so small that sometimes when we get that
It
specific,
gets
people
too
know who
easy
we're
to
talking
identify.
about. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I can understand that. But, I mean, that is a figure we very rarely see.
Okay, so I won't share our numbers. The typical residential cost is about $85,000 a
That's
year.
what I
I did want to say one other thing too. I'm sorry, I forgot. So, you know, in response to our changing student need, which is always changing, certainly we've adjusted things in-house too. You're not going to see a big fiscal impact from that. We haven't reduced staff. We haven't added staff. But please know that, you know, with that changing population and us being such a small district, we are constantly, you know, year to year fluctuating that, you know. Josh's local 4 program would be a great example of that. We moved away from an 811 behavioral programs in that building and switched to a 1211 developmental life skills program because that was our student need. Another example would be we had a 611 developmental room at the elementary for many years, didn't have enough students to justify having that program. Jody absorbed some of those students into her program, and some became out-of-district placements. So, you know, there's always that. We start months, you know, we started these conversations in December the year before of what we're looking at for programming in-house too.
Angie, you mentioned how many monitors
Mhm.
we have. So is that the title that's given now as opposed to aides
Yes,
to everyone?
took me a
that's-
long time to switch my
So-
to say it, yeah.
So that number you gave us is
AIDS, yes.
everyone that's in the district? Okay.
It's special.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So, that's really, I guess that's, just turn off, maybe I don't hear.
So really, the purpose of this evening was for Lauren to share with you the expenses that we're looking so closely at and the impact that that will have on the 18-19 budget. She was going to share the revenue stream, but in the past, there were items in the revenue stream that we didn't necessarily count on every dollar to balance the budget, and so that's causing us to pause and take a much closer look at the revenue stream this year to see if there's a gap, how great that gap may be. So I asked her to pause and wait until the next presentation to share that revenue stream when she can really look at it much more closely. An example would be Medicaid reimbursement. We've been doing that for several years now. That number seems to grow every year, which is wonderful. And we intentionally didn't bank on that money coming in. It was just sort of a bonus, money that we knew we could use to offset unexpected expenditures or to move into a capital reserve at the end of the fiscal. So this next fiscal will be looking at counting those dollars in the revenue stream. So we want to make sure that we're 100% accurate on all of those numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Lauren? Correspondence. The board received a number of postcards regarding a request for us to review our current curriculum on America's history of slavery and encouraging us to look at the research done by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we will pass that on to Pam so that we can do that. We received these almost at the end of Black History Month, but we will certainly look at that and for consideration next year. The board received a letter from the president of the Trumansburg Teachers Association regarding our recent action in terms of entering into negotiations with Ms. Bell to be our permanent superintendent. The board has, and I as president have written a response which we would like to read, and we will be sending to Mr. Hastings, the TTA president. So it reads, on behalf of the Board of Education, I am writing in response to your letter of February 14th addressed to the board regarding our recent decision to enter into negotiations with Ms. Kimberly Bell for her to be our next Trumansburg Superintendent of Schools. Thank you for sharing your concerns with the board regarding how this decision was reached. While wanting to stay focused on the concerns expressed in your letter, the Board of Education feels compelled to clarify that the board did, on several occasions during regularly scheduled meetings, explicitly solicit input from the faculty, staff, and community on how the board should proceed with selecting a new superintendent of schools. During those invitations, the Board of Education was clear that the two options were either to conduct a search, as was done last spring, or after a favorable performance review, hire Ms. Bell. The Board of Education believed that because the TTA was formally represented at these meetings, those open invitations provided sufficient opportunity for the Trumansburg Teachers Association to share their opinions with the board, either by letter or public comment. The board did not deem it necessary to schedule an official TTA question and answer session with Ms. Bell, since there was an almost daily opportunity for any TTA member to formally or informally meet with Ms. Bell in order to establish an informed perspective on how the Board of Education should proceed. Other members of the other members of the Trumansburg community not in attendance at those board meetings did share their views on this matter with the board via emails. Their positive comments and Ms. Bell's positive performance review encouraged the board to move forward and to offer Ms. Bell a permanent position as superintendent of schools. In an effort to work more productively and cooperatively with the Trumansburg Teachers Association in the future, the board has initiated the following steps to improve our communication with not only the TTA, but with all constituent groups within the district. These will include, but not be limited to, creating an easily accessible single Board of Education email address that will then be redistributed to all Board of Education members. An ongoing Board of Education agenda item entitled Faculty Staff Voice, which will provide a specific, unique, and individualized format for an official representative of the support staff or the TTA to express opinions, concerns, suggestions, questions, etc. to the Board of Education within the established norms of open forum. Finally, to work with our own Board of Education Community Relations Committee to explore and establish other communication links with the Trumansburg school community. Finally, the Board of Education wants to unequivocally reiterate the enormous appreciation we have for and the value we place on the outstanding work our entire faculty and staff perform every day for our students and community. While such expressions of admiration and appreciation could be improved with any organization as large as the Trumansburg Central School District, the Board of Education attempts to express these sentiments on an ongoing basis during faculty presentations to the board, public acknowledgement of the success of our athletic, academic, and performing arts students who are so capably led by our faculty and staff members, facilities that support your valuable work, amiable and productive contract negotiations, and recognition at retirement. As with our above stated efforts to improve communication with the TTA, we will strive to find additional and potentially more meaningful ways to express our gratitude and appreciation to all members of our faculty and staff for the work they do on a daily basis. On behalf of the Trumansburg Board of Education, sincerely, Gary Astles, President. So that will be sent to Mr. Hastings as the TTA President. And we will start our faculty and staff voice agenda at our March 19th board meeting. So we can look for that as a change. Any other correspondence that we received? I believe we received a letter of appreciation from Mrs. Hope Lewis, our instrumental band teacher in the high school, very late this afternoon, so we will bring that forward to our next meeting. But it was a very nicely written letter expressing appreciation for support for band members that participated in the New York State Band Directors Association Honor High School Band, of which I believe we had 5 students, so a significant number. Moving on to committee reports. Finance Committee, we will be actually meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, March 6th at 10 a.m. in the district office, and we'll report out at our March 19th meeting. Facilities Committee, and I believe we'll turn this over to Mr. Maglioka.
I'd like to introduce Alan.
Reintroduce him, we know him.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. Alan works at TSC Macy's. He is in charge of the energy group there, and so, you know, he kind of helped facilitate really what I'm about to kind of talk about. We were in conversation talking about solar and talking about opportunities for the district. And, I said, where can we put some solar panels on the roof just to, get us some extra power, offset some of the costs that we have for energy. And so we really started just throwing things out there. Well, we could have ground-mounted arrays or roof-mounted arrays, or maybe we could build a structure over a parking lot that would have the arrays on top. And we kind of looked at each other and we kind of said, we need to know what is feasible, what financially is feasible, what is feasible for in terms of structure and stuff like that. So Alwyn has a good relationship with Renovus, who are community members down towards Ithaca. And he said, why don't we facilitate a conversation and see what they have to say. So Renovus came in and we started talking about, does it make sense to go on the roof? Does it make sense to do some of these other ideas? And they kind of, knowing the numbers, they kind of said, well, really, in order for it to be financially feasible, ground mounted is really the way to go. Unfortunately, most of our existing open space is sport fields, so we don't want to eliminate those. We kind of started having a conversation, what are our other options? And Renovus has some contacts in the community, and they said that they would reach out and talk to some of our partners and stuff. And they came back to us and they said, look, we have a piece of property adjacent to our headquarters, and they said, why don't we look at the possibility of the district obtaining ownership of that land and what we could do for a solar array. So they came back and said, the district spends about $150,000 a year in electric. So that's kind of, they took our utility bills, Alan sent them all the information, and they said, so in order for us to, at a minimum, offset the $150,000 expense, we need a 1.5 megawatt array, which is pretty big. Takes up, 9 acres. 9 acres. So they said that the plot of land that they currently own is 10 acres. And so I said, okay, well that works. So what do we got to do? And so they ran some preliminary numbers, and it looks feasible. The caveat is we've kind of got to put together some money up front to offset the cost of the land purchase. They did email. We had originally thought it was a little lower, but what they're proposing to sell it is $189,000. So that's not part of an EPC.
EPC being?
EPC is an energy performance contract. So the way that they structure this project is they structure it as an EPC. The state, they send the information to the state. The state will, review the project, review the calculations for payback, and as long as it's within that 18-year window, which EPCs have to be in, the state typically gives approval to move ahead. If we own the land, that's the one piece, is we have to own the land. So, their initial numbers look real positive. Payback in 18 years, life cycle for a panel is 25 to 35 years, plus or minus, depending on the product. So essentially, the upfront money that we spend is offset, it offsets the taxpayer's share over the 18 years, and then after 18 years, it's savings. It's savings to the taxpayers. So where we're at now, there's critical timing pieces with everything. I don't mean to throw everything at you now with budget and special ed and capital project and stuff, but they have leases. It's not really a lease, but they've already gone through and had the approval process done with NYSEG. So NYSEG is billing them. They're billing them for that upfront cost to make sure that the grid can hold 1.5 megawatts of power, inserted into it. So they're a little anxious, they're a little anxious to, get rid of those fees, because they're not planning on doing this project for themselves, So, I talked to Kate Millar, she's their VP for Business Development today, and talked to her about some of the numbers, because, I'm still kind of learning the way that they're presenting the EPC. I'm still learning, it's a little different from a traditional EPC, so, but she said that, that some of the fees that they're incurring up front, she said they're not super, they're not looking to dump the land tomorrow, because I told her it would be a process for us. I mean, it's not like we can turn around and ask our taxpayers to, approve us purchasing land tomorrow. So, very, very supportive, she understood. And I told her that, it doesn't hurt for us to go and send an RFP out, because we want to be fiscally responsible and make sure that there's not other providers that could share with us some of the same savings at a less cost. So, I told her that, with Alan's help, maybe we'll put together an RFP in the next, couple weeks and send it out and see what the numbers really look like when, we really hold their feet to the fire, I guess you could say, with a competitive market. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, I think I'm excited, because it's a fun project. Local districts are doing this. I mean, Alan could talk about Candor. Candor has done this. They've done a solar project on one of their properties, and I think that that was really successful, the Candor project. So we're kind of following the same model, and if we can capitalize on doing this now, I mean, it's just the long term. It's a benefit to our taxpayers. So that's kind of where we're at with that. I intend on going through with an RFP process, and then we'll present the RFPs to the board or the facilities committee, and then we'll see how real this project will be.
So really big picture, what Joe was getting at is this is just the beginning stage of exploring opportunities for the district to use solar to offset that big expense every year in terms of energy. And so we're looking at savings of approximately $150,000 every year. And right now how these projects work is that the aid that comes back from the state in combination with the savings from the solar, together those two pieces pay for your expense. But like Joe said, there is an additional piece if we were to look at buying solar panels on a separate piece of property that the district does not yet own. That would be an additional expense for the district that would have to be taken into consideration. But initial steps are we're looking at it, we're talking about it. It could also be an educational piece for our students, which we would want to incorporate. And then move forward with the RFP process just to see what the competition is and how feasible this is for our district with the least amount of expense fronted.
I know that in Candor, they're actually using that to benefit the public as well. So there are all sorts of opportunities. So.
Well, that's one thing that I asked in the initial meeting was, if it's 10 acres and we only need 9,
Exactly.
how can we utilize that other acre? What would be that expense to put panels on that other acre, and how could maybe our partners like the village or the town benefit as well? So I think that we'll kind of get there after we get the initial proposal, because I'm really curious if it's feasible to partner with one of the local municipalities and see if we can help them too.
Joe, can you describe where that property is again?
Yeah, it's on 96. I don't know if you know where Renovus is. It's pretty close to the edge of the district, the southeast edge of the district. Yeah, southeast. It's right next to their headquarters. So right next to their headquarters, they have a tannish building, and there's an empty field right there. It has a barn. It used to be a horse farm, I think. and it's not currently being farmed. So they purchased the property from the owner, and they've kind of had it there, and they've gone through all the approvals with NYSEG to get it approved as a site. And then their intent is to, sell it to whomever's interested. So yeah, exposure is great too. It's right on 96, and we can put a nice sign on it that says Trumansburg Solar, and, so it's a good benefit a couple different ways.
Does the sale of the land by Renovis impact the cost or the price of the solar panels, et cetera? I guess my question really is, if we found 10 acres that were closer to Trumansburg Central School District and equally accessible, is the deal still the same?
The deal for the solar farm will be the same. The challenge is, you buy a piece of land, it has to have three-phase power, and at that section of the grid, NYSEG has to say yes to a 1.5 megawatt array. Right now, this piece of land is pre-vetted. NYSEG has already approved it for 1.5 megawatts. Just so happens that's the size we're looking for. Everything's done. Basically, we could start building as soon as SED says go. We get another piece of land, we have to go through the NYSEG approval process, which could be fine and could be quick, or it could be, sorry, you can't put that size of an array at this location. So that's the only caveat, and that's something that could be determined as part of the RFP process. Look at alternate sites, if they're cheaper, if there's a gain to doing that. We just need to recognize that we could go through the process and get a no from NYSEG, which means we have to start over.
So part of my curiosity also is, it seems like the price for the land has suddenly increased 20% from the conversation that we had last week in an
Yes.
informal meeting
So-
to this week. So was there miscommunication, or did the price jump 20%?
No, we asked, and we didn't ask the right person.
Okay.
We asked, one of the employees and not the owner.
Fair enough.
So I don't think that they were malicious in that price increase. I just don't know that the employee had the right information right from the get-go.
And if I could add, we're not locked into this piece of land. Right now, we've signed nothing, we've had a conversation. Once we go into the RFP process, we can shop around. There are multiple owners of large pieces of land that sit on three-phase power lines in the Trumansburg territory. This one's kind of prepackaged, looks good. We could also look at a couple others, and this process takes about 12 months. If we were to start aggressively going after it, in 12 to 18 months, this thing would be done. So, and in that time, we can shop for land, we can shop for partners, we can do all the things that are necessary to make sure we're getting the best possible deal.
I think that's an important point to make, Alan.
Yeah, the total cost of the project right now, they haven't included the land costs. This is what the project costs, and
And that's the payback period of 18 years is for the solar project itself, exclusive of the land.
correct.
I just want to walk through a couple parts of that, make sure we're understanding. So solar array is going to cost X. In order to satisfy SED, it has to pay for itself in 18 years. You take our credits from NYSERDA and the credits generated by the solar array, and that package has to pay for itself in 18 years. On top of that, SED is now going to give us aid, somewhere between 80 to 90% aid on that project. That's why this is such a sweet deal, because ignore the aid, this thing pays for itself. It generates $150 worth of credits. It takes in some NYSERDA money, which is a grant, and then we add aid on top of that. Now this starts to make a lot of sense for our district to look at. And that formula of being able to do that did not exist a year and a half ago. It's relatively new. It's been done 3 times in the state. One time was the Candor project, which my team was a part of. We're talking to several other districts that are looking at this, but that formula makes a lot of sense for districts to look at. So when you take something that pays for itself, and then you add aid on top of it, it starts to make a lot of sense. And it levels our cost for 20, 30 years out on our electricity. So really nice solution if we can execute it at a cost-effective level. The land is an adder here. We've got to figure that out. And in my mind, when you look at the aid, the land has to make sense. Like you said, if it's jumping 20% and we can buy it across the street for half price, well, then you know where we're going to go. We're not tied into Renovis. So.
I I'd also love to hear from Candor on how their experience has gone, just to see kind of the things that we can learn from and the things that we can replicate.
Jeff Kislowski, superintendent for Candor, happy to take phone calls. He's very happy with the process, and he's happy to share his experience, and he has some recommendations, some gotchas that he experienced that he would like us to avoid. But overall, they're very happy and they're very open to talk about it, as well as his business official also.
And the community is ecstatic as well.
I am. I think it's a great solution if you can get all those pieces moving in the right direction.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Any other questions for these gentlemen? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Douglas, do you have anything for us from BOCES, or?
We were snowed out, and snowed out.
Okay, that's good. Well,
So,
that-
good for us, I guess.
that'll facilitate the speed of this meeting then. Thank you. All right, administrators report, mission and vision work. Ms. Bell?
So I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, I know we had spoken previously about beginning the important work of mission and vision work, and I wanted to share with you that we have worked with the administrative team and identified 2 dates, April 5th from 8:30 to 4, and then again on April 10th from noon to 4. I'll be working with the administrative team to identify about 25 individuals that are representative of all constituent groups, so teachers, support staff, community members, some students. And what we'll be looking at is validating mission, vision, and beliefs about the district, identifying some strategic focus areas, and we have chosen Mike McDonald, who has done this work in the past for many districts, to come in and help facilitate the work of those 2 days. And so I anticipate reporting out quite a bit to the board at the conclusion of those 2 days about the work that we've completed.
Is the board invited to these?
Yes.
Okay. We haven't received that invitation yet. have we? Okay, just want to make sure I wasn't missing something. Okay, great, thank you. Any questions?
How do you actually decide on, I guess, the 25, how do you select the 25 people?
We've spoken as an administrative team, and part of it is difficult in that we already identified it's difficult to get sub-coverage. So the buildings, I think, are going to be speaking with our staff and seeing if people are interested. But again, it's a limited group, so we want equal representation, equal voices. Obviously, both are work days, so we recognize that's harder for families, but we do have some people within the community that are always available. They have a strong voice, they're passionate about the district, so we're just trying to get a good representation, but we'll be tapping on some shoulders. If people are interested, they should reach out to us as well.
Okay. Moving on, consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like to hold to discuss individually? Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So,
Second?
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. New business. Acceptance of donations. May I have a motion? Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby accepts the donation of $6,200 from the Trumansburg Music Boosters to the high school music department.
it's really.
Second. Questions or discussions other than shock at the amount? Wow, thank you very much to the Music Boosters Club. That's some serious fundraising right there. Thank you. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Approval of chairperson, be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg School District hereby approves Gary Astles as the chairperson at the capital project vote on March 13th, 2018, as presented. Motion? Second?
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor? Oh, I only needed one of you to shift, because I'm going to recuse myself, so, and then it wouldn't be a majority, but, okay, thank you. Motion carried. Approval of election inspectors, be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby approves the following as election inspectors for the capital project vote on March 13th, 2018. Darla Seeloff, Deanna Krantz, Zola Lincoln. What? Jofika Lincoln.
So moved.
Second? Discussion, questions? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Our two walk-on items, we'll take E first. Authorization for signature. Be it resolved that the Board of Education for the Trumansburg Central School District hereby authorizes Kimberly Bell, Superintendent, to sign a memorandum of agreement between the Trumansburg Central School District and the Trumansburg Leadership Association regarding administrative vacation buyback days effective July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2021, as presented. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Question? So the current administrative contract allows for vacation buyback because our administrators often are unable to use all those vacation days, but it's a one-time buyback, and there is no fiscal impact to the district if they chose to do it twice. So if they buy some over the summer and then they realize in the spring, typically this time of year, they're still going to have too many days remaining that they're unable to use. Right now, as it stands, they wouldn't be able to buy those days back. So we want to afford them the opportunity to buy them back in the spring if they did not use them. So that's what this does.
Other questions?
Do all of those sections apply to that? Article 15, Section 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And we have a motion or a new business in terms of recommendation. A number of districts across the state are approving similar language. I know a few of you have had a brief moment to look at this prior to the meeting. It reads, whereas across the country the lives of hundreds of students and school employees have been lost due to gun violence in schools over the last several years, and whereas the Trumansburg School District believes that the health and safety of our students and employees is our highest priority, and that they will thrive in a vibrant, healthful, safe, enriching, and respectful environment, and whereas the Trumansburg School District has prioritized improving safety precautions to prevent gun violence incidents from occurring, as well as to encourage mental health support systems, and whereas the responsibility for preventing gun violence incidents cannot be relegated to school districts alone, and now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Trumansburg Central School District calls upon the United States Congress and the New York State legislatures to adopt laws and to take actions that prioritize the protection of students and the school system employees from gun violence on school campuses. Motion?
So moved.
Second? Questions or discussion? So we're not advocating any specific action, we're asking them to take some that they feel is appropriate.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions or discussions? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Open forum. At this time, we would like to give all give our audience an opportunity to ask any questions about this agenda or about operations within the school district. Personnel matters will not be addressed in public session. Comments may be recorded and responded to by the Board of Education or the superintendent within 24 to 48 hours. We ask that you introduce yourself to the board, state if you are a district resident, and that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Hearing the same deafening silence that we heard the first time, we'll move on. Thank you.
Gary,
We have a hand.
can I add a little bit of administrative report since I had to step out?
Yes.
You may.
Please. Sort of a point of pride, I just want to share a couple of really important things. I appreciate, you already mentioned the all-state band members. We had 4 students that were in the concert band, one that was in the jazz band this past weekend. But this overall weekend was pretty amazing for our high school and some of the things that our kids have accomplished. And unfortunately, Grace isn't here to report on these things because she's at musical rehearsal because we're down to the wire 2 weeks before showtime. So I wanted to mention the band, the kids in the band that were so successful there. Again, for such a small school to have 5 kids go to that is a testament to the work that Hope is doing with our band kids. We also had 2 student athletes that were competing at the state championships for indoor track. We had a pole vaulter and a race walker who were both competing at the state championships, so that was exciting, including a freshman and a senior. So
A race walker?
Race walker, yes. So Dom McCullough came in first place in sectionals for pole vault and went on to compete at state level. And I honestly don't know what his final, I honestly just never got a chance to ask the kids how it went. So Dom competed in the pole vault and Mackenzie Masters competed in the race walk. She came in 4th at sectionals, but then 2 of the people ahead of her were DQ'd. So she got 2nd place and made it to states. The other really important thing is our HYPE robotics team had their first competition this past weekend, and they ended up coming in. They captained the 2nd place. What's the word? Alliance team. They captained the 2nd place Alliance team, and that essentially means they came in 2nd place at the competition, but that qualifies them for their world championships, which are, I don't know where. I haven't had a chance to catch up with Brad. Detroit this year. So our robotics team is qualified to move on, but they still have one more competition locally that'll be at Rochester at RIT the weekend of the 15th, 16th, I believe it is. If you get a chance, if any of you have the opportunity to follow them and go see this competition, it actually really is amazing. I've been down a couple of times to RIT to watch them compete. It really is cool how the whole system works. But again, to have a school the size of Trumansburg to send teams to these competitions, because often the schools that we're competing against are much larger schools. I know the district that I came from had a combined team for 2 high schools, and each high school had 1,600 kids. So they were pulling from 3,200 kids to create a team of 40 to 50 kids. And our team of 20 kids is beating them. So, point of pride for me that we're beating my old home, my old hometown. But the other follow-up to this, and that I want to just thank our school district and our district office for making this happen, because all 3 of these situations could have potentially been affected by the snowstorm that hit on Friday. All 3 groups left early on Thursday and found ways to get hotel accommodations, transportation, made some quick saves to get ways for these groups to get where they needed to get, so that all of them left on Thursday before the storm hit, got to where they needed to be, had a great experience, were safe, and competed in these huge, big events at state levels and international levels. And so thank you to everybody who made that happen. Lots of pride for a little town here in T-Burn. Yes.
We'd like to share that pride in both seats. I was wondering, could you give me again the band?
So we have four students that were in the concert band.
4 students in concert.
And 1 in the jazz band.
Okay.
And that's a total of about 100 kids from the entirety of New York State that were selected for these
Right.
things. So
That's
5
pretty
of them
impressive.
were from Trumansburg.
Well, we sort of like to brag at our
Yeah.
Friday meetings.
Yeah.
The more information I
Yeah.
have, the better.
I mean, just to have, we had the jazz band is extremely selective, and it's one student to a part. I know Hope sent a letter that I hope you all have a chance to see that email that Hope sent, but I just wanted to get it out here in this environment to say it's really, really amazing to have that many kids competing and participating in that kind of program. So, thank you.
Great. Good news. Board forum? Questions, concerns, thoughts? No? May I have a motion then to adjourn to executive session for discussion of employment matters of a particular person? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We will not be returning for regular business after executive session. Thank you very much.